Welcome everyone to another Company Fears 2 replay cast. This time we're going to have a 2v2 as you can see on Across the Rhine. It's going to be sent in by Scrundorlo on the left hand side playing as the OKW. And his ally is going to be Il Patada, Brazil, playing as Wehrmacht, already setting up a infantry company. On the enemy team we're going to have SSQC Danfouché playing as the British. And his ally is going to be the Soviets, played by Uncle Jimbo. So Across the Rhine, by now you should already all know what the map is like, but just in case you don't know, let me show you. 2 field points on the very far ends of the map, quite close to each other's bases, so a pretty secure location, but also harassable because there's pretty much no cover in both of these areas. There's a little bit of green cover down here, but not really all that much. The more greenish cover area is this one near the VP. And so it's a pretty easy harass if you have the nerf for it, especially if you are the OKW with the Cubo-Wagon, which Scrundorlo has already granted out on the field. And it's capping a point, so it's doing what it's doing best. Whereas the Stern Pioneers are actually charging for the fuel point just right from the beginning, and that's an interesting choice, but he's going to meet some infantry sections, which means that he's only going to be able to probably harass slightly the British, because the infantry sections with the close range and long range bonus to their rate of fire from the heavy cover, they're gonna be pretty much superior to the to the Stern Pioneers. So what you're normally used to as with the OKW is having your Stern Pioneers close into distance very quickly and overwhelm any enemy force, but with the infantry sections you cannot do that. So Scrundorlo wisely pulled back his Stern Piles and waited for the Cubo-Wagon to come up. He's going to follow it up with 2 Volksgrenadiers coming up from the base, which is probably a pretty decent decision because of the layout of the map. You can't really go with too many Stern Piles because of the close range engagements not really being that many and not really being easy to find. But another choice that is possible on this map is the double Cubo-Wagon, but I feel like the double Cubo... I need to actually... I need to get my Steam offline because otherwise... Okay, otherwise people are going to be talking to me and I don't want that because it's annoying. And there's 3 infantry sections from Danfouché, along with a Maxim trying to secure the north, which is obviously very important because of the presence of the fuel. 2 infantry sections actually capturing the fuel point, which is not really a good idea. He's going to need to send one of these squads over to cap the other one if he wants to be more efficient. In the south, we see that the allies from the minimap have been able to actually secure most of the points in the south, even the fuel point, with a conscript. He was only facing some combat engineers over here from El Patada, so he was pretty easy in his advance over here. However, there is a Grenadier squad coming up, which will definitely give quite a lot of a hard time to this one conscript. In fact, it's very likely that this conscript squad will have to retreat if they don't want to get wiped. In general, the Soviets are going to have to do a little bit more than sending in a single conscript if they want to actually capture the center VP and fuel point and hold it for any length of time. In the north, we see that there are 3 infantry sections still from Danfouché. He hasn't gone for anything else. He does have the tier 1 though, so we will see very soon probably some Royal Engineers and maybe some emplacements out of him. He doesn't have the Royal Emplacement Regiment, the Advanced Emplacement Regiment, sorry. So we won't really see the SimCity spam all that much from him, but he's still going to be pretty much having the ability to go for the Royal Engineers, which is just a little bit of a advanced emplacement light almost. Now, 2 Maxims actually cross-firing onto the MG42 will definitely mean that the MG42 needs to retreat as quickly as humanly possible from this position. Can't really take the crossfire from these 2 Maxims, and so he's gonna save his own MG rather than risk it. So far, it looks like Uncle Jimbo is really the one that's really been pulling the heavy weight for the Allied forces, and that's kind of to be expected in the early game. The British aren't quite as powerful as the Soviets, but still, Danfouché really needs to be getting... Oh, that's why. Because he went for a sniper. That's why he was flowing so much manpower and wasn't pumping out as many units. Because he wants to go for the sniper. Now, the sniper, while a pretty good pick in general because of the effectiveness against infantry, especially the Grenadiers, because 1 shot means that 25% of the squad's firepower is going to be pretty much gone already. So that's a really, really good tool against the Wehrmacht player, especially if the Wehrmacht player is not one to go for snipers himself, such as I am. I really don't like to play with snipers, so I almost never go for them, even when the enemy has a sniper, which is, well, partially due to the fact that I'm bad at microing them. But if you're up against a player like that, then using a sniper is pretty much one of the most effective tactics, because countering a sniper without a sniper is pretty hard. Ooh, this one Pioneer Squad will definitely go down from the crossfire from these conscripts and these infantry sections, thus also saving the Maxim from a very gruesome fate at the hands of those Pioneers that were flanking. So pretty decent engagement for the Allies right now, and it's going to be even better right now because of the advance of the sniper. Now, one of those ways to actually counter these snipers without a sniper of your own are light vehicles such as the Cube Wagon, the Scout Car, the M20, and for the Soviets... Wait, who does have that for the M3 Scout Car, actually, the Clown Car, as it's called sometimes. So those vehicles actually have a detection bonus versus snipers, because obviously snipers cloak. They not only have a detection bonus, though, they also have a accuracy bonus against them. So that is pretty much the way you counter snipers if you do not have your own sniper. Now, the Cube Wagon, though, went down because, again, partially due to the Cube Wagon not only being microed correctly from our poor Skrundolo, partially also because of the fact that the British sniper does have the anti-tank rifle, the Boys AT rifle, at his disposal, so he does do quite a bit of damage to those light vehicles. He's still very vulnerable to them, though, so you need to be very careful. Right now, the Allies are having a bit of a resurgence. They're even managing to get some good capping going on in the center, pretty much pushing right away to another point, the munitions, which on this map is very, very easy to acquire from both sides. So pretty nice to just have that extra munitions income. As you can see, 47 munitions income for the Allies compared to the 26 from the Germans, which is pretty deadly if the Allies can actually use it to their advantage. The Soviets especially can use it to their advantage with the awesome demo charges that so far Uncle Jimbo hasn't really been placing, but in general, also Molotovs are decent usage of munitions. But in general, if you want to spend all your munitions to the Soviets, you're going to be needing to grab yourself either guards, which, well, considering the fact that shock rifle frontline tactics was picked, is not going to happen, or use demo charges and mines from the combat engineers. For this, you will need a second engineer squad, really, because one engineer squad is always pretty much going to be occupied doing either some capping duty or some type of repair, building construction, the likes of that. It is a pretty easy mistake to actually think that there's only, the need to actually go for only one combat engineer. You would most likely be well served with a 2 combat engineer detachment pretty much all the time, because, well, it is better to just have one of those engineers for planting mines and diffusing mines with a minesweeper, and the other combat engineer for other duties. But, for example, right now it wouldn't really be that important because it's much more important to get out an AT gun, such as Uncle Jimbo is doing. There is a scout car on the field for Il Patada. It's not particularly fast scout car. It's only 8 minutes in-game, and, well, usually scout cars can be brought out pretty quickly. So nothing that should surprise the Allies right now, but if they cannot get a counter for it, especially on a map where a scout car can maneuver such as this one, it can be quite a big annoyance towards any Allied players, especially if there's a sniper on the Allied team. The sniper is not going to be at all in any position to actually help himself against the armored car, unless he can have that critical shock, which does put a stun on the scout car usually, so it would be pretty decent for the critical shock to actually be available, but it requires veteran 1. So in general, you're going to be very, very hard pressed to keep your sniper alive up to Vet 1. And then even when you have with Vet 1, the critical shot does take quite a long time to aim before it can actually be fired. So during that time, the 222's autocannon is going to be pretty much ripping into the sniper. Now, pretty bad play over here from Danfourchet, getting his infantry sections right into the building, and not only is this building pretty bad because it's only got one window on each side to actually fire out of. Actually, are these 2 windows or 1 window, or probably 2 windows because of this spot and this spot, but yeah, essentially not that many windows to fire out of, so going for 2 squads in there is a bad idea. Oh, the grenade, very dangerous, barely escapes with 2 guys, very lucky for Skrundolo. Actually, that was a pretty bad bit of micro over there, but in general, it looks like the British are going to be repulsed a little bit in their advance towards the center of the map, which is going to go to the Soviet player. Uncle Jimbo going for some shock troops, going to try to secure the center. Probably could do that with a nice smoke grenade, but right now he's getting bombarded by some kind of mortar from El Patada, so you should definitely get the shock troops out of there. Those are really expensive to reinforce, and it's really not a good idea to lose them really for no reason, such as right now he's doing, which is, well, exactly what you don't want to be doing your shock troops, because, well, they are supposed to be elite flanking troops rather than meat shields. And in general, what was I talking about earlier? Well, this, obviously getting too many guys onto a building can be very dangerous, especially when the enemy is the OKW, you know, having those very, very cool incendiary grenades, very, very fancy. Ah, one shot! Okay, so Patada is really, really weird. That's, oh, looks like something took out the Grenadiers. See, if this was before the patch, I would say it was a mine, but mines cannot kill more than 2 guys. So, what was it? 80 gun shot. That was an 80 gun artillery shot. Really, really good play from Uncle Jumbo, using that kind of not really popular ability. And I can see why it's not really that popular. In my experience, it is always very, very inaccurate. Now, conscripts think they're going to go for the counterpart of the ZIS, the Pak 40, one of the best 80 guns, if not the best 80 gun in the game. Very, very important for every Wehrmacht player to pretty much protect it at all times. You don't want it to be at the mercy of the enemy infantry, especially cheap infantry like conscripts, because you really, really don't want this AT gun to go down for no reason. Now, Armored Car, going to try to save his friend over here, but he's going to pay the price for it. The AT grenades are available to Uncle Jimbo, and he's going to have the recharge in 18 seconds, but the Lux comes in to save the day. Actually, the Lux is going to be not able to save the 222, but he's probably going to be able to at least wipe out this one Ved 1 conscript. He should definitely chase, though. Right now, he's being very conservative with the Lux, which is probably the good decision in hindsight. Sorry, not in hindsight. It is a good decision because there could be a mine placed over here. There could be that ZIS-free AT gun placed wherever, pretty much in this entire area. Of course, we know from hindsight and from having the God of War sort of view without the FOW that, well, there's no AT gun there. But yeah, in general, it looks like that was pretty much the best decision to not chase. But again, a more aggressive player would have chased and gotten the wipe on that conscript. Now, there are some quite big troubles coming on the way for the Germans, and these troubles are these 3 infantry sections. All armed with Bren guns, they're going to be very hard to deal with just infantry. Now, unfortunately for Don Fourchet, the infantry sections are pretty much the worst infantry in the game for anti-tank purposes because they don't even have a anti-tank grenade. Fortunately for him, he does have the AC armored car, which is going to be able to pretty easily force away this Lux. In fact, probably going to be able to kill it if there's nothing to help it out, which there isn't. There was a Grenadier coming up to try and Panzerfaust the AC, which is going to be coming out, but not in time, and I'm not sure if this is going to be enough to kill this AC. There is a machine gun coming over here, going to be firing into the frontal armor of the AC without EP rounds, so no real damage going to be dealt over here. And really, the unit that they were needing to take out that one very, very pesky armored car is this Raketenwerfer. One real big problem right now is the fact that the Germans are lacking in AT in general. They had this pack, which was forced away earlier, kind of opening the path for the AC to come up and do its damage. And in general, there was the Raketenwerfer, but Raketenwerfer hasn't done anything so far. It could have been pushed up a little bit further, and that would have been really good for Skrunderlo. Now, Skrunderlo does have a Storm Pioneer squad with a Panzerschreck, and that's going to be very dangerous towards the AC, especially because the AC is not being pulled back. It was pulled back a little bit too close to the front line, and so it was in danger of actually dying for no reason. Thankfully for him, Skrunderlo again decided to be very conservative with the Raketenwerfer, and so he was not able to actually get in a killing shot on that. Really good play with Skrunderlo's Grenadiers over here. Going to be managing to capture the fuel point, and despite the winning engagements and in general the victories that the Allies have been grabbing, right now the Germans do have the resource advantage. Now, T-34-76 is on the field for Uncle Jimbo, which is going to bridge the gap to the KV-8 and possibly, well, possibly the KV-8 and the S-2 heavy tanks quite easily. And also the T-34-76 is going to allow him to have that very nice mobile flanking vehicle. Not only a flanking vehicle, but also a vehicle that can be very useful as a counter-harassment tool. Harassment obviously being what Skrunderlo just did, capturing the enemy resource points while the enemy is occupied fighting elsewhere. So having the T-34 there would have been pretty much enough to prevent the Volksgrenadier from capturing the fuel point. Or even once you get the T-34 up to Ved 1, you're going to have that excellent secure mode ability, which is going to allow you to capture points in return. So not only is it going to allow you to have a T-34, well, buying a T-34 is not only going to allow you to have a counter-craftsman unit to counter any enemy pesky moves such as that one. If they manage to actually capture the point, you can recap it with the T-34 instantly, which is pretty good because, especially in the later stages of the game, you're going to be facing enemies who place machine guns on VPs just to annoy you and prevent you from recapturing the areas. And so with the T-34, you can just walk up and not care about any machine guns. Now, speaking of VPs, we do see that the Germans are in a bit of a pickle right now. They have 357 VPs, which means that right now the Allies have been able to get a pretty decent lead. But at the same time, it's nothing that the Germans can't really handle. It's not really anything that is going to mean anything too drastic for their playstyle, because one of the main things about essentially taking VPs out of the enemy is that if you can manage to bring them down to like 100 or in general some very low number, that is if they're paying attention, which is not always guaranteed, but if they're paying attention, that usually means that they're going to be playing very, very recklessly just to try to get a VP and avoid dying. But at 327, that's really nothing to be worried about. Now, shock troops going to be standing in the negative cover. That's obviously a very bad decision. Grenade going to be going down in the mortar. Mortar is actually up to vet 2, so a kill on that would take out the veterancy, which is pretty good, but it comes at a pretty hefty price. Lots of allied soldiers dying in the negative cover. You don't want to push up across this road. It is a very, very dangerous thing, and since we have already seen the Fallschirmjäger pop and right now the Violent Assault, we can infer pretty safely that Skrunderlo has gone for the Luftwaffe ground forces, which is going to be pretty useful later on for the airborne assault, allowing you to use munitions to actually grab some Fallschirmjägers. Now, there are 2 Fallschirmjägers being spawned by Skrunderlo, and I feel like that's a mistake, because Fallschirmjägers are a very expensive unit. 440 manpower, just to call it off, and very expensive to reinforce as well. So you don't want to be having too many Fallschirmjägers, because not only is it hard to actually get them, and you're going to be spending a lot of resources just to acquire the unit, they're also going to be very expensive to use in a fight at all. As you can see right now, every time the sniper fires, well, that's essentially like if he was over here and he saw the Fallschirmjägers, he selected them and he just deleted them. Just imagine the Fallschirmjägers as little blobs of manpower, and the sniper just comes in, takes it, right-click, delete. That's pretty much what the sniper is doing, deleting the enemy manpower. And that's why the sniper is just so very dangerous. Even more dangerous when the enemy has elite infantry. Sniper is up to 14 kills, which is not really that much after 17 minutes, but it's a pretty decent number in general. Especially considering the sniper is up to vet 2, so he's still going to be at that vet 3, which is going to increase the penetration and damage of the sniper rifle, so making him even more dangerous to light vehicles, just in case the Germans decide to actually go for more light vehicles, which I'm not sure if it's going to be the case, because as you can see, Skrunderlo is going for the free truck setup, which means that he's going to go for Wrecking Tiger. Really bad push over here from Uncle Jimbo. He's probably going to lose this one T-34 to the pack. Yep, last shot connects perfectly and takes out the T-34. T-34s, this is the one thing you don't want to do unless you're perfectly sure that the enemy doesn't have any anti-tank guns in the area or any mines. You don't want to charge in from the front. You just don't. The T-34 is a very fast for the firepower, it's a very fast vehicle. So you can use it fairly easily on flanking maneuvers, even very extended ones, such as going through here. That would have been perfectly viable, coming up through the south of the map, through this little ramp, and coming in from the back. That would have been perfectly viable. Coming in from the side over here, to the left of this building, through this warded area, to the flanks over here, and coming from behind over here, also viable. T-34 is a vehicle that can be used very creatively. It does not need to be charged in like a heavy tank. It does not need to really do anything. In fact, it cannot charge in like a heavy tank, unlike the Panther or the Comet. Those medium tanks are pretty much gonna be not really that effective charged in, but they can do it. It's not optimal, but they're gonna have enough armor to survive if they're just coming from the front. T-34 doesn't have any armor. Like, the T-34 is just paper. Even just this one Panzerschreck squad is going to be able to do quite a lot of damage with its one Panzerschreck. because the T-34 doesn't have a lot of armor, it doesn't have a lot of HP. Now, what it does have is a lot of firepower against infantry. With its 2 machine guns over here, the DPs in the front, and the 76mm main gun, it can do quite a lot of damage against infantry. Now, this is not going to be good enough against support weapons such as this anti-tank gun, this Raketenwerfer, or the PaK-40 anti-tank gun. So you want to be very careful in that regard. Now, wait. What? Well, looks like there's a bug on the Cromwell. Cromwell doesn't have a gun. So he will be shitting out shells, literally, which is going to be pretty funny to see. But yeah, the Cromwell is coming in and shitting out shells, popping smoke with the AAC to actually help the Cromwell escape with a little bit of less damage than it would have taken otherwise. So right now, pretty good engagements for the Germans. Really good usage of the Raketenwerfer as well from Skrunderlo, being very active with it. Raketenwerfers are a unit that is kind of underrated because, yes, it is a support weapon, it is an AT gun, but it can be used very aggressively because of its ability to retreat. Its ability to retreat just generally gives it a little bit more survivability than other AT guns, and so it allows it to play a little bit more aggressively, especially thanks to the cloak as well. You can do some pretty damn sneaky maneuvers, be very dank with it. El Potado right now really is making a big mistake. He's making a terrible mistake. He has 224 fuel, and he has the assault... No, sorry. He looks like the assault support guy, but he's actually the Storm Doctrine, which is not a very popular doctrine, but it is a very viable one. And the Storm Doctrine generally means the fact that he's not going to have a big heavy later on to bring out with the fuel. So there's really no reason for him to actually go for a Stug right now. The Stug would have been a lot more viable in case he had the Assault Support Doctrine or the Lightning War, or any doctrine that generally contains a Tiger, Spearhead, you name it. And that would have been, ooh, that grenade is going to be very bad. Oh god, the Fallschirmjäger's taking so much damage. In fact, they might get wiped by these. Oh no, that was a very bad play from Danfouché. Danfouché could have easily just stopped his guys. Okay, here's one thing that some people don't understand about light machine guns. Well, actually the Bren doesn't really have that problem, but in general, you want to stop, okay? You want to stop with light machine gun equipped units, because most light machine gun units can't fire. Now, Bren gun guys, I'm pretty sure can fire, but they're not going to be as effective. Wait. Actually, no. I think it's only the Commandos that can fire on the move with the Brens. Yeah, it's only the Commandos. I was thinking of Company Heroes 1. Yeah, okay, so my point still stands. Only the BAR can fire... Yeah, okay, I'm bad. Only the BAR can fire on the move for light machine guns, or the Bren used in a Commando squad. So what you want to do is you want to stop. You don't want to have your guys moving. Shock troops, move. You know, STG-44 equipped Folk Grenadiers, you can move. Yes. But with any light machine gun equipped unit, such as Grenadiers, no, you want to stay still. Really good positioning on the MG34, going to be suppressing pretty much everything from Uncle Jimbo. Uncle Jimbo also just lost a squad, not sure where. He's trying to make a little bit of headway to the north, which I feel like it's not really that good of a decision. I mean, the only thing that the Allies really need in the north is the fuel point and the VP. The VP is quite close enough to the center so that you can divert some troops from the center really easily. And then there's really nothing else that... Oh, there goes an entire shock troop squad. That's a lot of manpower. So, yeah, really bad for our poor allied players. But, again, there's really not much that they want from the north. They really want the field point, and that's it. You can just send in some units that are fighting over the center to actually capture the VP in case the enemy harasses it, recaptures it, whatever. So you don't really need to focus like 4 infantry squads over here. You need to focus your infantry on this fight for the center and the south. And right now the Germans are definitely pulling ahead. After a bit of a slump in the VPs in the early game, after some bad engagements, now they're starting to recover. They're starting to, you know, get the real lead. Not in terms of, not just in terms of resources and units, but also in terms of VPs, which is really when you start to have some problems for the Allies. The Allies really want to win early, especially the Soviets. The British can slug it out a little bit later on as well, but in general, the Soviets are really going to be looking for that earlier win. They can win late game, especially if you are with the shock rifle frontline tactics. But in general, you're better served winning early. Now, there is an AVRE on the field right now, which is a pretty decent decision, I feel like, because the Germans aren't using a huge amount of support weapons. They're using a decent amount, though, and the AVRE is excellent against weapons that cannot really move very quickly to dodge its very, very dangerous petard mortar. It's a 280mm, I believe, and, well, it doesn't say, of course. Well, it's very dangerous. Oh, no, 290mm. Yeah, it's very dangerous. Don't want to get hit by it. Right now, the KB Flamethrower, though, is not being used in the correct way. The way to use the KB Flamethrower is you charge it in like this, but you charge it in combined with other troops. Combined with other vehicles as well, if you have that luxury. You don't want it charging alone, especially against AT guns. Because while their cannon riffer is a pretty easy AT gun to take out, for the reason that normal AT guns, for some reason, the formation of the models, the formation that the models take is a very spread out one. There you will have the two guys manning the gun, pretty clumped up, but then the other two guys will just stay in quite the back and sort of to the side, whereas the actual Reckenwerfer, they like to huddle up. So for some reason, the Reckenwerfer is much easier to take out with these area of effect type vehicles. Now, the main problem with it, though, is that it's still an anti-tank gun. It's still going to deal quite a lot of damage to the KV-8. Now, the KV-8 right now is not a good purchase because his ally went for an EVRE. What this shows is the fact that they went for pretty much two units that have the same role. It's the big, heavy assault vehicle that is supposed to do this. Completely delete support weapons, or flame them to death, or in general just be a very tanky frontliner, so that more efficient units in terms of actual DPS towards vehicles, DPS in general, can take over and win the fight from there, after the big ol' assault vehicle has taken out all the AT guns or all the MGs. Now, not only they went for two very, well, not very expensive, but decently expensive assault vehicles at the same time, Uncle Jimbo also kind of delayed his IS-2 quite a lot. The IS-2 has 230 fuel price tag on it, which means that right now he's going to be waiting for... okay, let's see if my math actually holds up. So he's going to need 180 more, well, not 170, which means that he's going to need about 8 minutes and a half more of fuel income to actually get the S2. And then what is he going to do? Like, it could have been, out much earlier if he hadn't spent 145 fuel on the KV-8, to be precise, 7 minutes earlier. So, yeah, it's just, in general, was not a good idea to go for the KV Flamethrower. The same role that the KV Flamethrower can have, which is to be a big frontliner, can be sort of covered by the IS-2 as well, because the IS-2 being very tanky from the front, much tankier also than the KV-8, can do that. And also the IS-2 does have quite a very powerful HE gun, because it's 122mm, so it's very, very dangerous against clumped up support weapons and infantry as well. So in general, you don't need the KV-8 in this situation, and I feel like it's a very big mistake, especially since Skrunderlo, as I've talked about earlier, was going for the King Tiger, and I feel like the Allies should have known that. Right now, another big mistake that the Allies are doing is one from Danforche. He's losing pretty much all of his infantry in really stupid ways that shouldn't have been pretty much even conceived of at all for an Allied player, especially a British player. British players really need to conserve their units. They are expensive. They are expensive to maintain, but they are more expensive to replace. And in general, once they get the veterancy, they're very deadly. So you want them alive. You want them alive as much as possible. Considering the fact that he went for the squad size increase on his infantry, that kind of tells me that he was putting a lot of weight on his infantry. And in fact, he is putting a lot of weight on his infantry because he only had the Cromwell and the AC in terms of armored vehicles. The AVRE is kind of a supportive armored vehicle. It's not really gonna be a main fighter. So his main fighting power is supposed to be infantry, and he's really not treating his infantry with the kind of respect that they deserve, really. Needs to be paying a lot more attention to them. Skrundro also had some infantry management issues. He also lost one of the Fallschirmjägers, which ironically is probably a good thing, because he's already quite starved for manpower as is, with 195 income, with just one Fallschirmjäger and 2 Volksgrenadiers. He's also lost one Volksgrenadier squad, has he? Let's check it out. No, he only built 2. That's interesting. I would have liked 3 Volksgrenadiers, because 3 Volksgrenadiers allow you to have a lot more actual map control and capping power, because the Volksgrenadiers, being that very, very sort of sturdy, sort of jack of all trades, you can do quite a lot with them. So they really never hurt to have more than 2. Now, T-3476 definitely biting off a little bit more than it can chew by trying to circle strafe this Stug, which is a good idea, but it's not really that good of an idea around Panzerschrecks and Panzerfausts. In general, with the T-34 and with medium tanks in general, ooh, really nice flank from the conscripts actually. Where did they come from? Probably over here. Gonna take out the Stug, but losing the T-34 for the Stug I feel like is not really that worth it, because the Stug is pretty much gonna be useless in general, whereas the T-34 can still have quite a versatile role in this late stage of the game. Now, a stolen Zis anti-tank gun is going to be a very, very, very bad thing for poor old Uncle Jimbo. This anti-tank gun does sometimes get a little bit of flack from allied players for being... okay, sure. That was a Volksgrenadier squad. Completely demolished by the AVRE. Yep. There wasn't much that Skrundrolo could have done to actually avoid that, but I just love it. Yeah, this does get the a little bit of flack sometimes from allied players. That's really bad for Uncle Jimbo. Don't want to get clumped up against the King Tiger ever, because of its penetration values being quite a bit lower than, for example, its counterpart of the pack, or the M157mm anti-tank gun using the armor-piercing rounds, the discarding Sabo. So it's not really gonna be that effective against the big heavy tanks of the Germans until it gets some veterancy, especially the vet-free. The vet-free increases target penetration, obviously. So having that is gonna make it a little bit more viable against the big German cats. However, when it is in the hands of the Germans, it is actually an excellent anti-tank gun because of its pretty high rate of fire, pretty damn decent range, and the ability to use the tracking, which is gonna give you quite a bit of information on the minimap. It's a very, very underrated and underused ability that you should always actually keep in mind of when you're having a Zis gun up to Vet 1. Because it is going to increase your view range by quite a bit, and it's also going to have a bit of a map hack effect on the minimap to reveal infantry, so you want that. Other than that, it's not as powerful in terms of utility as the 57mm pre-patch with the infinite line of sight from the Take Aim, but it's still pretty good. That's the paradox of Allied AT guns. They're not that good as the Allies against the Germans, but they're really, really, really good as the Germans against the Allies, because they have a higher rate of fire than the German anti-tank guns. Unless we count their Raketenwerfer, which is not really an anti-tank gun. It's kind of a hybrid. Oh, Stuka dive bomb almost takes out the shock troops. Shock troops going to be living by a very, very slight edge. There is an Su-85 on the field, and again, this is going to pretty much delay the S2 heavy tank by more time. Is this a second KV flamethrower? No, it isn't. Okay, thankfully. The Su-85 is definitely a good decision to counter the King Tiger because of its heavy 85mm anti-tank gun. But at the same time, it is definitely not going to be enough overall, and I feel like saving up for the IS-2 by not getting these two vehicles would have been the better decision for Uncle Jimbo. In an IS-2 versus King Tiger duel, the King Tiger usually wins, and it is to be expected that it does because it's got essentially a bigger price, so it makes sense. But the IS-2 can do quite a bit, actually, of damage to the Tiger. Excellent Stuka strike coming in from Skrundrolo, going in a nice line, predicting the enemy is going to retreat, and actually getting the damage as they were retreating, so that was a really good play by Skrundrolo. So pretty much right now the Allies are pretty much, I said pretty much, 3 times in a row out of infantry, and that's a problem because right now they really, really need some kind of VP control. They are triple capped, which means that in 3 minutes they're going to lose. Triple cap means that in 3 seconds you're going to lose 3 VPs, so 1 VP a second. 180 means 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to win, or sorry, to recover one of the VPs, or possibly 2, hopefully 2, and then win. And you're still going to be at a very low VP count, which is why triple caps are so dangerous, and you never want to get triple capped. It's pretty much one of the worst things in the world to get triple capped. Sometimes it is even worth it to lose squads over not getting triple capped. Now, there is an LEFH howitzer on the field from El Potada, which is obviously coming from his doctrine. He's also gone for the tier 4 and the Broom Bear. Now, the Broom Bear is an interesting decision, but it is one that I feel is justified because the enemy does have quite a lot of infantry, And right now, El Patada does not really need any anti-vehicle support in general because he does have those 2 anti-tank guns. One of them a stolen Zis, one of them a Pack. Pack actually up to Ved 1 is going to allow him to actually use the target weak point, which means stunning vehicles quite a lot more killing power than just you're going to be sitting there planking away at them and waiting for them to retreat. If you can force them to not retreat, that's obviously pretty good. And right now, the allies are going for a lot of tank destroyers, and this is a problem. Tank destroyers are not a really good unit to actually push into enemy lines. They're a really good unit to defend, but they're only decent at pushing in terms of anti-vehicle, and they're completely worthless at pushing in terms of anti-support weapons and anti-infantry, which is really what you're going to be looking for a big pushing vehicle. And what right now they need more than anything else is to push. So I feel like they're definitely in not really that big of a shape. What just happened with the Stuka? There goes the anti-tank gun once again. Takes also quite a lot of damage off the AC. AC surprisingly is still alive, but really can't really do much at this point. Can only use the target tread to deal some annoyance to the big cats and the Broom Bear. But yeah, it is nice to have. There is actually a Panzer IV on the field from Skunderlo. I kind of like the purchase of the Panzer IV because, again, they don't really need the extra AT. And the Panzer IV is so much better than the Panther at anti-infantry. The Panther is nothing to laugh at, especially when you have the Pinto-mounted machine gun upgrade. But the Panzer IV just has that extra edge against infantry because of its HE power on the gun, whereas the Panther's HE, it's really not good. So it's going to be better at sort of protecting the flanks, being a little bit of a annoyance over there. Not really as a main frontline fighter, though. Unless it's facing something like an AEC, the Panzer IV really doesn't have the armor required in order to take on something like a Firefly. The Firefly is going to be able to pretty easily penetrate the armor on that Panzer IV and pretty easily do a lot of damage with the Tulip rockets. In general, though, the OKW Panzer IV is a little bit better at late game than the Wehrmacht Panzer IV, because the Wehrmacht Panzer IV has less armor because the Wehrmacht Panzer IV does not come with the armored skirts from normally. This is another thing that you need to remember. Armored skirts increase the frontal armor and the rear armor. There is no side armor in Company of Heroes, so even though the armor is on the side, it's going to be counted towards the front and the rear. Now, again, sending in the Panzer IV alone is really not the best decision, especially when there's Piats around. Piats are very, very dangerous if they can hit, which is not really guaranteed. In the south, we saw the Broom Bear going down to the Su-85, which is pretty much the only thing on the map that could kill the Broom Bear, so very, very lucky for Uncle Jimbo. He was able to catch that one out in a pretty precarious spot. Well, there's also this Firefly, but the Firefly was pretty much on the other side of the map. Yeah, right now, the AVRE is taking quite a bit of damage, but right now, the problem is the fact that to fire against the AVRE, the infantry from Skrunderlo needs to stop, both to use the Panzerfaust and to use the Panzerschreck. Germans need to stop a little bit and sit down and have a bit of a nice, comfy seat to be able to fire the big old Nazi Panzerschreck. So having that essentially as an easy target, the AVRE was able to wipe the Stern Pioneer. Now, I feel like Skrunderlo was a little bit overzealous in using his Stern Pioneers in that way. I feel like just saving them and retreating them would have been better, but hey, it doesn't really matter because the VPs. Again, 3 minutes ago, what did I tell you? Yeah, don't get triple capped. That's pretty much the main lesson of any team game. Because in team games, for some reason, I see more triple caps in team games than in normal games. AVRE tries to do something against the King Tiger. It's only really actually doing something in that it's being essentially a tank. Not a tank as in a big old armored vehicle surrounded by armor. A tank as in tanking damage. And yeah, it was taking the damage. The King Tiger would have died if the game had gone on any longer, but oh well, who gives a shit. So, main mistakes from each player. Let's start with the Allies because, well, they lost. Dom Fourchet floated a shitload of manpower and also pretty much wasted a lot of his infantry all the time, which is a big, big mistake as the British. And in general, I feel like had he played a little bit better, he would have had many more chances to actually succeed in this game. he wasn't able to really hold his own in general, and Uncle Jimbo had to fill in for him. Partially because of that, I feel like he was compelled to buy a KV-8, which slowed down his S2. He never ended up getting the S2. Did he ever even go for anything out of the Tankovi Battalion Command? No, he didn't. So that was also another problem. He wasted 70 fuel on this building, which ended up doing nothing for him. He had, well, obviously his doctrine is more focused towards a little bit closer range maps. These big open maps don't really offer shock troops that much, so perhaps not going for as many shock troops as he did, which was 4, I believe. Did I count it correctly? No, 6 shock troops. Okay, that's a lot. Not going for 6 shock troops and going instead for a lot more of a balanced build with conscripts, maxims, and Zisguns supporting each other. That would have been much better for him. And while it is harder to manage, definitely, than the horde of shock troops, if you don't want to, have a hard to manage big force, don't play Soviets, because that's really, the Soviets are about combined arms. You want to be able to manage different types of units at the same time to achieve victory. If you don't want to use combined arms, don't play Soviets. It's just that simple. Other than that, the Germans had really the main problem of the mid-game. They didn't have any armored vehicles in the mid-game. El Patada decided to wait a long time to go for the Stug, and even then he went for a Stug and not a Panzer IV, which is what I would have gone for. He could have gotten out of the Panzer IV probably 3 minutes quicker than he ended up getting out of Stug. Even 4 or 5, he did things a little bit my way, but yeah, he decided to be a little slow with it. And in general, I still don't really see the doctrinal pick having really done anything. It did help out a little bit with the Stuka bombing strikes. That was pretty decent. He, every once in a while, decided to go for the Stuka bombing strike, doing quite a bit of damage to the Allied infantry, which definitely helped keep the Allies on their toes and not really leave the infantry standing still a little bit too long. He ended up going for the LVFH howitzer a little bit late because he needed to use his fuel, and so he needed to use his manpower to use his fuel. And if you use 600 manpower on a field artillery piece, you're not going to be spending any of your fuel. You get the deal. Which is why he didn't go for any of that earlier. And in general, I feel like a Tiger Doctrine would have served him better for his playstyle. Now, however, I still would have liked for him to go for a Panzer IV because Skrunderlo went for the King Tiger. King Tiger, definitely viable pick to go for. Absolutely. But at least one of the German players should have gone for a medium tank or something. Because again, they were very, very heavily pushed by the Cromwell and the T-34 and the swarms of Allied infantry at a time when a very simple Panzer IV could have been a very nice stopgap measure to prevent that from happening. And if the Allies had taken that advantage, taken that momentum, and been a little bit more aggressive, or maybe even a little bit less aggressive in some regards, especially with their T-34s being wasted. And I'm not sure what happened to Cromwell, but I'm guessing it was not very pretty. Yeah, pretty much they could have had a much bigger chance of actually carrying through to the late game and having a little bit of a higher chance of success. So I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the cast, and I'll see you soon.